Today we're going to be talking about the history of gentrification and displacement in West Harlem. But before I get into the weeds, I want to take a moment to explain to you why this video is so important to me. You see, in the 1960s, I grew up in the Bronx, and my parents used to take me down to my cousin's house on 8th Avenue and 139th Street. And I didn't want to go because they told me we were going down for Friday night, and we wound up staying the entire weekend. But when I got there, the times were amazing. In the summertime, we used to take our mattresses out and sleep on the fire escape. I remember my grandmother's house on Shriver's Row, where you could walk out of her bedroom and she'd have a garden in the back room. I can remember the smells of the rotisserie, people coming home from the Apollo Theater and people coming home from Lennox Lounge, and all the music and smells, and it was just such a great experience. But getting into the weeds, well, what is gentrification? Basically, there are four types of gentrification that are noted. One is transit gentrification, where transit structures are either modified or newly arranged, which allows people access into the city. That's one way gentrification works. That's done by public transportation and sometimes highways. Racial gentrification is something that's more prominent. You have financial gentrification, where it's done just to produce revenue. And then there's green gentrification. The term gentrification was coined by a lady in England in 1964 named Ruth Glass. And she was given a study on people who lived in Liverpool. And she came back with the term called gentrification. When you look at other elements that come with the gentrification, there is also green gentrification, which is relatively new. And that revolves around what is something called the 15-minute concept, which is being implemented in a lot of cities in the United States and throughout the world. The concept basically is that you should be able to get to most of your services and needs within 15 minutes. And it's called the 15-minute community. And New York City is on board with that. That would be sharing resources like automobiles, shopping local, better traffic regulation, crime, and public control, more community living. The tools that were used in gentrification in the past, one was redlining, which was done in 1934, which restricted the investment in which a company could invest in an area, and also limited the amount of insurance that would be relegated to that area. Zoning is another tool used in gentrification, whereas they can take a piece of property and zone it for one family as opposed to multifamily. Restrictive covenants is not used that often anymore, but if you look into your title, you might find that in your title, if it's that long ago, it tells you who you can and cannot rent or sell your property to. There's blockbusting, which is not used that much anymore. One concept on how it was done is realtors used to pay black families to call a white family and ask for someone that obviously didn't know, a white family in the neighborhood, and ask for a black name to try to scare them out of the neighborhood. And the final tool really is favoring business over housing developments, or building a lot of mixed development units, which are being done a lot now, particularly in Harlem. So if you like the video, give me a thumbs up. But there's a couple other things. There's something called topophilia. And what that is a connection that people tend to get when they've lived in a community for a while and they've had to leave the community. Now let's talk about the specific history and gentrification and and displacement of West Harlem. When I describe West Harlem, it's sort of flexible. I'm talking east to 5th Avenue, west to the Hudson River, north to 155th Street, and 110th Street south. I am also including Morningside Heights in this survey. The early residents of Harlem were farmers. It was farmland. The black people who lived in New York City started out in the Wall Street area. They moved up to 5 Points, then to Hell's Kitchen, eventually to San Juan Hill, and finally to West Harlem. The advent of the subway and the first migration brought blacks to West Harlem. There was a gentleman who is known, his name is Philip A. Payton, and he is known as the mayor or the father of Harlem. And what he did was, he was a realtor. He owned the company, the Afro-American Real Estate Company, and a white man had bought real estate in Harlem, West Harlem, and he evicted some black people. So what Philip A. Payton did was, he did the exact reverse. He bought a building, and kicked out white people. To give you a different flavor, the demographics, in 1914, Harlem was 3/4 black. About 70,000 people lived in Harlem. And during the Great Depression, there were all types of issues. Along that time was the Harlem Renaissance, which is a whole separate video to get into. And then what happened at the end of the Second World War, was the Second Great Migration. And that brought a lot of black people from the South to the North for jobs. Around that same time, the National Highway Act was implemented, and that did a lot of destruction in a lot of black neighborhoods. But particularly, one of the biggest person impacted, or almost impacted, Harlem was Robin Moses. And he actually proposed a highway across 125th Street. He also proposed the demolition of Shriver's Row and to be replaced with a housing development. Along that time, they began to build the high-rise housing projects, and in the 50s and the 70s, we started to get some of the heroin influence. I do remember a revival on 125th Street. I do remember when they implemented the Adam Clayton Adam Clayton building, and I do remember the lack of revenue that came into Harlem around that time. And my son actually tells me a story about my uncle that lived in a brownstone, and I wish I had bought it, but they had brownstones in New York City selling for $1 in the 70s. They were owned by the city. these same brownstones are worth $4 million today. Well, one of the biggest problems in Harlem today is Columbia University. They are one of the largest landowners in New York, and they own 17 acres, I believe, in the West Harlem, Morris Heights area. They accumulated most of this real estate through eminent domain for housing, expanding their campus. To give you a flavor for what Harlem looks like today as far as the figures are concerned, the national average for master's degrees in an area is 14%. In Harlem now it's 18%. Bachelor's degrees nationally is 14%. In Harlem it's 24%. Some college nationally is 28%. In Harlem, West Harlem I should say, and I only mean West Harlem, is 20%. The black population, I said before, at the turn of the century was 70%. It is now 43%. The Hispanic population is 31%, and the white population is 17%. Well, the median income in Harlem is $70,000. It's a very safe community, it's commutable, and it's relatively inexpensive. There's something called the whole food theory. When you have a whole food move into your neighborhood, you know you're going to be gentrified. What Harlem can hope for is that the National and City Landmark Commission begins to take some of these buildings in Harlem and call them national landmarks before they become things of the past. I thank you very much for your time in watching the video. I hope you've gained something out of the video. And again, if you do like the video, I intend on doing more. The next one will be on East Harlem. And you have a great day. Bye.